Hey there, pirates. Welcome aboard the Anime No Me channel. Edward Newgate, known as Whitebeard, was a living legend in One Piece, with a bounty of 5,046,000,000 berries in Chapter 957. A man who could face Gol D. Roger on equal terms, as seen in Chapter 966, where his strikes split the sky. He wielded the Gura Gura no Mi, a paramecia that could shake entire islands, as in Chapter 576 at Marineford, where he almost destroyed the marine base with earthquakes. In Chapter 552, Sengoku calls him the man closest to One Piece, suggesting that Whitebeard knew about the treasure and Laugh Tale, but never pursued it. Why? The theory suggests that the reason was not weakness or lack of ambition, but a conscious choice tied to a dark secret of the Void Century, perhaps revealed to him by Roger in Chapter 966, which made him prioritize his family over the title of Pirate King. Luffy, as the spiritual heir of Roger and Joy Boy in Chapter 1043, would discover this reason at a crucial moment, perhaps in Elbaf in Chapter 1158. Through a poneglyph or a conversation with Shanks, who was Roger's apprentice and had met Whitebeard, the revelation would be shocking. Whitebeard, who could have conquered everything, chose not to become king for a reason that resonates with Luffy's ideals, freedom and protection of his nakama, but also carries a tragic weight, perhaps linked to the burden of the D, or the cost of the One Piece, which Vegapunk begins to unravel in Chapter 1115 regarding the Great Kingdom. This discovery would make Luffy laugh and cry, as in Chapter 576 with Ace's death, reinforcing his determination to become the Pirate King, but with a deeper understanding of what that truly means. Whitebeard was a titan in One Piece. In Chapter 552, he is described as the only one who could match Roger, and in Chapter 966, we see this in action. He faces Roger in a duel that splits the sky without giving an inch. His Gura Gura no Mi, which he uses in Chapter 576 to devastate Marineford, had the power to destroy islands, rivaling ancient weapons like Pluton in Chapter 1060. In Chapter 957, Rayleigh confirms that the Whitebeard pirates were a global force, and Roger, after finding the One Piece in Chapter 968, talks with Whitebeard, suggesting that he shared secrets about Laugh Tale and the Void Century, but there are clues to his choice. In Chapter 576, Whitebeard says he does not desire wealth or power, but a family, protecting his children, like Ace and his commanders until the end. In Chapter 563, he refuses to ally with Roger, showing disinterest in the One Piece despite knowing its location. This suggests that Whitebeard knew about the treasure, perhaps its nature as a wish-granting artifact, as hinted in Chapter 968, but chose not to pursue it. The theory proposes that Roger revealed to him in Chapter 966 the secret of the One Piece, claiming it requires a sacrifice, perhaps giving up something more valuable than power itself, like the family Whitebeard cherished, or triggering a cataclysm like the world sinking described by Vegapunk in Chapter 1115. The theory suggests that Whitebeard did not become Pirate King because he discovered that the One Piece, linked to the Great Kingdom in Chapter 1115, comes with a price he was not willing to pay. In Chapter 966, Roger, after Laugh Tale, laughs and cries, suggesting the treasure is more than gold, perhaps an artifact that grants total freedom, but at the cost of something personal or global. Whitebeard, who valued his family above all else, as in Chapter 576, where he dies protecting Ace, may have refused the One Piece upon learning that claiming it would destroy his bonds or start a war that would kill his children. Perhaps Roger revealed that the Pirate King must bear the burden of the D, and like Joy Boy in Chapter 1043, leading a revolution that sinks continents, as in the Void Century in Chapter 1115, something Whitebeard, with his fatherly heart, rejected. Another possibility is that the One Piece is linked to the ancient weapons Pluton, Poseidon, and Uranus, and requires their activation, as suggested in Chapter 1060, when Lulusia is erased by Uranus. Whitebeard, who witnessed the God Valley Massacre in Chapter 1095, where buccaneers like Kuma were enslaved, may have feared that using the One Piece would trigger a new cataclysm, like the tsunamis that shaped the world in Chapter 1115. He chose to protect his family, as in Chapter 576, instead of pursuing a throne that would destroy everything he loved. In Chapter 563, he tells Roger, "I'm not interested in your treasure," suggesting he knew the cost, perhaps the lives of his allies or the balance of the world. Luffy would discover this reason at a crucial moment, probably in Elbaf, in Chapter 1158, where Norse mythology and the giants might reveal secrets of the past. Perhaps a poneglyph, like the ones Robin reads in Chapter 818, mentions a man with a white beard who refused the throne for love, or Shanks, who met Whitebeard in Chapter 966, tells Luffy Newgate knew about the One Piece, but he chose his children over the world. In chapter 1115, Vegapunk reveals that the Great Kingdom fell to war. Whitebeard, knowing this, may have avoided repeating the tragedy. And Luffy, upon hearing this, would be shocked, as in chapter 576 with Ace's death, but would laugh, Whitebeard was badass. He chose family, but I'm going to get the One Piece and protect everyone. Another possibility is that Rayleigh in chapter 519, or Dragon in chapter 432, reveals the secret. Dragon, as revolutionary leader, may know of the burden of the D, and tell Luffy that Whitebeard refused the One Piece for fear of the price, like Nefertari Lily in chapter 1085, who betrayed the 20 kingdoms for ideals. Luffy, with his pure heart, would turn that weight into motivation, as in chapter 1044 with Nika, shouting, "No matter the cost, I'll be Pirate King and save my Nakama." Luffy's reaction would be a mix of shock and admiration. In chapter 576, he cries for Whitebeard's death, seeing him as a hero who protected Ace. Upon discovering that Whitebeard gave up the One Piece for his family, Luffy would laugh, as in chapter 1045 with Gear 5, "Hahaha, Whitebeard was amazing, but I'm going to get the One Piece and keep my family together." He would embrace the challenge, determined to overcome the sacrifice, as he does with Ace in chapter 589, promising to be a king who loses no one. The crew would react emotionally. Zoro would say if he refused it for his men, he was really strong. Let's surpass that, Luffy. Sanji would light a cigarette. A man who chooses family is respectable, but our captain will do even better. Robin would smile. Interesting. The One Piece demands sacrifices, but Luffy can change that. Nami would shout, if the treasure costs that much, it better be worth it. Usopp would cry, Whitebeard was a monster, but Luffy is our monster. This revelation would unite the Straw Hats, as in chapter 800 with the Grand Fleet, to face the price of the One Piece. What did Whitebeard discover that made him step back? The theory suggests that the One Piece, linked to the Great Kingdom in chapter 1115, is more than a treasure, perhaps an artifact that grants wishes, as hinted in chapter 968, but with a cost. In chapter 1043, Zunisha says Joy Boy returned with Luffy. The One Piece may require the Pirate King to lead a revolution that sinks the world, like the tsunamis of chapter 1115. Whitebeard, who saw God Valley in chapter 1095, knew that activating this power would kill his children, like Ace in chapter 576, and chose to protect rather than conquer. Another possibility is that the One Piece requires sacrificing the inherited will, like the D Carry in chapter 1085. Whitebeard, who was not a D but an ally of Roger, may have refused because he didn't want to extinguish that flame, choosing instead to live as a father, as in chapter 576. Luffy, as a D and Joy Boy in chapter 1043, could overcome this using Nika to rewrite destiny, as he does in chapter 1045 with Laughter. The world government, led by Imu in chapter 1085, fears the One Piece because it could expose the Void Century, as Vegapunk reveals in chapter 1115. Whitebeard, knowing this, avoided Laugh-Tale to not draw Imu's wrath, who destroys islands with Uranus in chapter 1060. His choice protected his family from a global buster call, like the one at Ohara in chapter 395. Luffy, upon discovering this, would confront Imu with anger and laughter, as in chapter 1044, saying, "You hid the One Piece, I'm going to get it and make everyone free." Knowing Whitebeard's sacrifice, Luffy would face the same dilemma: pursue the One Piece and risk everything, or protect his Nakama. In chapter 1045, he laughs in the face of danger with Gear 5. Against Imu in chapter 1085, he would use Nika to overcome the cost, saying, "Whitebeard, you were amazing, but I'll be king and save everyone." It would be epic, with Luffy's conquerors Haki in chapter 1010 shining, uniting the world like Joy Boy in chapter 1043. Whitebeard did not become Pirate King because he chose family over the One Piece, fearing its cost a cataclysm or sacrifice, as in chapter 1115. Luffy, discovering this, would laugh and cry, as in chapter 576, deciding, "I'll be king and protect my Nakama." This theory hits hard emotionally, connecting Whitebeard's legacy to Luffy's journey, with Laughter and Sun Punches changing the fate of the Grand Line. That was today's content. We hope you liked it and want to share your opinion on the subject. Don't forget to share the video, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care and stay amazing.